He said to the black girl, "You can't afford that $100,000 guitar." So she picked up the $100,000 guitar, sat down on the stool in the middle of the store, and played it. But before that, before the silence that stopped everyone in their tracks, there was a man in a gray cap in the corner of the room who had been watching everything from the start, and no one realized who he was. "You can leave now." Derek King said this without even looking up from his computer. 42 years old, suit without a tie, hair combed with the precision of someone who's terrified of looking unkempt, manager of Harmon Strings, the most expensive music store in Nashville, the kind of man who judged a person's worth by the soles of their shoes. And Maya Ramirez was wearing worn-out sneakers, faded jeans, a backpack with duct tape on the strap. I said, "You can leave." This time he looked up. What Maya saw in his eyes wasn't anger. It was something easier than anger. It was effortless contempt. The kind that needs no justification that exists even before the person opens their mouth. She was 18. It was a Tuesday in October, and she had crossed 4 states by bus to get to that store. "I want to see the guitar." Her voice came out firm, firmer than she expected. Derek stood up slowly. He walked around the counter with the air of someone doing you a huge favor just by existing in the same room as you. He stopped 2 undermeters away. He crossed his arms. "You don't have the money to buy that guitar." It wasn't a question. 3 employees in the store, 2 customers at the back of the room. Everyone heard. No one said a word. Maya didn't look away. "I didn't ask you the price." A small, controlled irritation flashed across Derek's face. He was used to intimidating people with silence, with his stature, with the atmosphere itself, the soft lighting, the instruments in glass display cases, the burgundy carpet that muffled even the sound of footsteps. The entire store was a statement that certain people didn't belong there. "Young lady," he lowered his voice, but not enough. "That guitar is worth $100,000. Get out of here before I call security." It was exactly at that moment that Maya saw him. In the farthest corner of the room, almost hidden behind the display of effects pedals, there was a man sitting on a low stool, gray cap, plain black jacket, coffee cup in hand. He watched the scene with an expression Mia couldn't immediately decipher. He didn't intervene. He didn't do anything, but he didn't look away either. Maya turned her eyes back to Derek. She took a breath. She walked toward the wall where the guitar was on display. The sign read 1962 Gibson Les Paul Custom, $100,000. Do not touch. She didn't touch the guitar. Not yet. She pressed her fingertips against the glass of the display case. Slowly, as if recognizing something she had lost. "I need you to leave now." Derek's voice had a new edge. Maya turned to him. And for the first time since she entered the store, she smiled. "Do you know the name of the luthier who made this guitar?" Derek didn't answer. "I knew you wouldn't." She opened her backpack. She took out a yellowed envelope, folded in half, and placed it on the counter without another word. No one in the store understood what was happening, not even the man in the gray cap, who had finally gotten up from the stool. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's much more to come. The envelope had a name written by hand on the front, Raymond Ramirez. Derek looked at the envelope. He looked at Maya. He didn't touch the paper. "What is this?" "A letter." Maya shrugged. "From the man who built this guitar." Silence. Raymond Ramirez died 6 years ago. She continued in the same tone as if she were commenting on the weather. He was a luthier, 23 years making instruments. This was the last guitar he built. That doesn't change. "No, but it says something about me." The man in the gray cap had approached. He was now about 5 meters away, pretending to examine an effects pedal on a side shelf, but Maya could feel his attention in the air, thick like atmospheric pressure before a storm. She ignored it. For now. "My dad built this guitar." She said it took him 14 months. He'd send me photos every week, every step, every detail. The raw wood, the glue drying, the frets being set one by one. I was 12 and would stay up late just to see the updates. Derek frowned, an expression that tried to look skeptical but had unease beneath it. When he finished, he sold it to a collector in Atlanta. He said he was going to use the money to pay for my music school. Maya paused. 2 months later, he died in a work accident. No one moved in the store. I spent 6 years tracking down this guitar. From Atlanta to Memphis, from Memphis to St. Louis. Now it's here. She looked at the display case. I didn't come to buy it. I just came to look. Derek was silent for 3 seconds. Then something in his face closed off like a window slamming shut in the wind. "That's a very beautiful story." The cruelty returned to his voice, colder now. "But it doesn't change anything. You have no way to prove any of that." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "All right," she said, and she turned to the man in the gray cap because he had stopped pretending he was looking at the pedals. He was looking directly at her. There was something in that face, an expression Maya had only seen once before in an old video she'd watched hundreds of times as a child. A live concert from 2009, where a guitarist played a solo so mind-blowing that the camera shook because the cameraman was laughing with excitement while filming. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. The man tilted his head slightly as if answering a question that hadn't been asked out loud. Then he looked at Derek. "Can I talk to you for a second?" His voice was calm, almost casual, but there was something about it that made people pay attention without knowing exactly why. Derek looked at him. For the first time since Maya had entered the store, he seemed genuinely uncertain. With you. It'll be quick." Maya watched the two of them walk away toward the back of the store. She couldn't hear, but she could see Derek's face change, confused, then tense, then a different color, something between poor and embarrassment that she hadn't expected to see in that man. One of the employees approached with cautious steps, a young man about 20. "Can I offer you some water?" he whispered. Maya almost laughed. "No, thank you." She turned her eyes to the guitar in the display case. The mahogany had that dark honey color that only decades-old wood can have. Maya knew that shade. There was a photo at home, the only one left, where her father held a piece of that same raw wood, smiling at the camera with sawdust in his hair and on his shoulders. She hadn't been able to look at that photo in 2 years. She felt the heat rise in her throat. She swallowed. At the back of the store, Derek King had come to a complete standstill, and there was something in his body language, in his shoulders, in his hands, that looked like the posture of someone receiving news that changes the magnitude of a mistake he thought was small. His name was Marcus Young. Not that anyone in the store would recognize him. He had spent years avoiding cameras, turning down red carpets, giving practically no interviews. But anyone who truly loved the guitar knew the name. 5 Grammys. A career that critics described as a private conversation between a man and his instrument. 47 years old, born in Memphis, he had played on stages across 3 continents before quietly retiring from public life 2 years ago. Maya knew who he was because her father had spoken of him. "Marcus Young is the only guitarist who makes my guitars sound like they're being played the right way." She had once heard at age 10 through the keyhole while her father spoke on the phone. She hadn't understood it at the time. She understood now. Derek returned alone. His face had that specific look of a man who had just heard something he didn't want to hear and was still trying to process it. He stopped in front of Maya. He was silent for a moment. "I need to check the instrument's documentation," he said finally. "Go ahead," said Marcus, coming up from behind. Maya looked him straight in the face for the first time. He was taller than she'd expected. There were calluses on 3 fingers of his left hand, the kind that never go away, that become a permanent part of the skin after decades of pressing strings. He held out his hand. "Marcus, I know who you are." Maya shook his hand anyway. "Maya, Raymond's daughter." It wasn't a question. She stopped breathing for half a second. "Did you know him?" "He built my first custom guitar." Marcus looked at the display case. Not this one. A different one, but the same hands. Something slowly opened up inside Maya's chest. She kept her expression in check. "He never told me. He was that humble." A pause. "I heard about the accident. I'm sorry." They fell silent. Not an uncomfortable silence. The kind people who share a loss sometimes create a stillness that acknowledges something without trying to fix it. Derek returned too quickly to have actually checked anything. "There are some provenance issues with the instrument we need to review." "What issues?" Maya asked. "It's routine, Derek." Her voice was flat. "What issues?" He looked at her, and then for the first time that afternoon, he looked at her as if she were a person. Not a problem. A person. And he began to speak. What Maya discovered in the next few minutes turned everything she thought she knew about that visit upside down. When Raymond sold the guitar in 2018 to the Atlanta Collector, the sales contract included a clause demanded by Raymond himself, who had learned enough about the market for rare instruments to know what he needed to protect himself from. The clause was straightforward. In any future resale of the instrument, Raymond Ramirez's daughter had the right of first refusal, first to be notified, first to buy at the same price offered to the market. The guitar had passed through 3 different owners since 2018. The clause had been ignored in all 3 transactions. Harmon Strings had acquired the instrument from a dealer in St. Louis 4 months ago, and the store knew about the clause. It was in the Providence documents in black and white. The decision had been to sell quickly to a private buyer before anyone asked questions. Maya looked at Derek without blinking. You knew it wasn't a question. Derek didn't answer, but the silence was a full confession. Marcus stood quietly beside her. There was something in his eyes, The worn adult angered someone who's seen too much to be surprised anymore, but who still feels the pain just the same. Who was going to buy the guitar? Maya asked. Derek hesitated. Who was going to buy the guitar? Derek. The name came out slowly, as if Derek were still calculating right up to the last second whether there was any other way out. Gerald Hall. Maya didn't recognize the name. Marcus did. He closed his eyes for 2 seconds. When he opened them, there was something different in them. Gerald Hall has been collecting rare instruments for 30 years, Marcus said, his voice low. He buys them to keep. Most of the guitars he owns have never been played since leaving the store. They sit in climate-controlled rooms on glass shelves. He has 3 instruments that belong to legendary musicians and has never let anyone play them. Maya processed this. Did he know this guitar belonged to my father? Gerald Holt knows everything about the instruments he buys. A pause. And about the looters who build them. What Marcus didn't say out loud, but what Mia understood completely was this. Gerald Holt had sought out this guitar specifically because he knew about the clause. He knew about Maya. He had paid above market value to Harman Strings on a single condition that the transaction be completed before any heir was located. It wasn't collecting, it was erasure. The last guitar Raymond Ramirez had built would go into a locked room where no one would play it, no one would hear it, no one would know it had ever existed. Maya stared at the display case for a long moment. The dark honey mahogany, the pickup her father had hand-tuned, the serial number carved into the inside of the body, she knew it was there even without seeing it. Then she turned to Derek. The clause gives me the right of first refusal. The instrument is still in your possession, right? The sale to Holt hasn't been finalized yet. Derek looked at Marcus. Marcus returned his gaze with an expression that left no room for doubt. It still is, Derek said. Barely. Then opened the display case. The 3 seconds that followed were the longest of the afternoon. Derek walked over to the glass. He pulled a small key from his pocket. He opened it. Maya held out her hands. The guitar was lighter than she'd expected, and yet it weighed as much as everything she knew about it. 14 months of work. Photos sent at 11 at night. Her father's voice explaining the type of wood in a call Maya had recorded on her phone and still couldn't listen to all the way through without having to pause in the middle and look away. She sat on the stool where Marcus had been. She positioned the instrument and she played. It wasn't a test chord. It wasn't hesitant. It was as if her fingers knew before she decided. Muscle memory from a lifetime spent watching her father's hands and learning without realizing she was learning. The sound that came from that guitar filled the entire store. One of the employees stopped what he was doing. The young man who had offered her water stood with his mouth agape. Derek King leaned against the empty display case and didn't say a word. And Marcus Young, who had heard the best guitars in the world, played by the best guitarists in the world, stood completely still for 45 seconds while Maya played. 45 seconds without blinking, without moving, without doing anything but listening. She played for 4 minutes. When she stopped, there was absolute silence. One of the customers at the back of the room had filmed the whole thing on his cell phone. Maya hadn't noticed when he started. Marcus crouched slightly to get down to her eye level. "Did your father teach you since I was 6? Maya's voice sounded different, smaller. He used to say that a well-made guitar carries the luthier's voice even when it's silent, that the instrument tells the story of the hands that made it. Marcus was silent for a moment that lasted longer than seemed possible. He was right. Maya's eyes stung. She didn't break down, but she came close. The video went live that very night. The customer at the back of the room had posted on Twitter with the caption, "I've never seen anything like this in my life." In 6 hours, 3 million views. In 12, it was trending in 4 countries. It wasn't just the sound, it was the context. The humiliation the store employees confirmed in the comments. The story of her father. The guitar that had traveled 6 years in 4 states to reach the right hands. Maya hadn't slept when the phone started ringing the next morning, first a journalist, then a record label, then a documentary production company, then at 11:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, a number she didn't recognize. It was Marcus Young's office. What he proposed was simple. An instrumental album, guitar solo, no vocals, no frills, just her hands and the sound of the instrument. The title would be her father's name, Raymond. Maya accepted without hesitation. But before that, there was a matter to resolve. The lawyer contacted the morning after the visit to Harman Strings took less than a week to confirm what Derek had admitted. The right of first refusal clause was valid. It had been violated in 3 consecutive transactions, and Maya had full legal grounds to contest ownership of the instrument. Gerald Holt got in touch 2 days after the video went viral, not through the lawyer, on his own cell phone. The call lasted 8 minutes. At the end of it, Holt agreed to transfer the guitar. Not because of legal pressure, not because of the public scandal, but because, and Maya only learned this weeks later from a source close to him, Gerald had watched the video from the store 18 times in a row. And on the 18th time, he had turned off the computer, sat in the dark for a considerable while, and then called his own son, whom he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. No one knows what was said in that conversation. But the next morning he called Maya. The guitar arrived in a box lined with protective foam wrapped in a gray flannel cloth. There was a short note inside, handwritten. "It should have gone to you first. I'm sorry." Maya read it 3 times. She folded the note. She put it in the envelope along with her father's letter. The 2 pieces of paper finally sharing the same space. Derek King was fired 4 days after the incident, not due to external pressure. The owner of Harmon Strings was a 71-year-old woman named Carol Harmon who had built the business over 40 years and learned what had happened from a call from her own daughter, who had seen the video on Instagram. One Sunday afternoon, Carol closed the shop for an entire day. She reopened with new customer service protocols and a simple sign at the entrance. "Everyone is welcome here." Maya found out about it on Twitter. She read it. She was silent for a moment, then she picked up her guitar and played for 2 hours straight. The album Raymond was released 18 months later. It entered the top 10 in 23 countries. In the week of its release, Maya gave a single interview. The reporter asked what she wanted people to feel when listening to the album. She thought for a second that someone built that with love, she said, and that love doesn't disappear when the person leaves. It stays tucked away somewhere, waiting to emerge at the right time. The guitar was beside her during the interview in its open case with the light shining on the dark honey-colored mahogany, just as it had always been, just as it always would be. If this story touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel. Every week we bring stories like this, stories we never forget, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. She walked into the most expensive music store in Nashville wearing worn-out sneakers and a backpack with duct tape on the strap. The manager didn't even look up. "Get out of here." Maya was 18. She had traveled across 4 states by bus to get there, not to buy, just to look. "That guitar is worth $100,000. You can't afford that." 3 employees heard him. No one said a word. Maya didn't leave. She walked over to the display case. She pressed her fingers against the glass, and she said something that stopped everyone in the store. "My father built this guitar. Raymond Ramirez Ludier, 23 years in the trade. This was the last guitar he made before he died. He sold it to pay for his daughter's music school. 2 months later, a workplace accident took everything." Maya spent 6 years tracking down this instrument, from Atlanta to Memphis, from Memphis to St. Louis, all the way to Nashville. There was a man in the corner of the store, gray cap, coffee in hand, watching everything in silence. No one knew who he was, but he knew who Maya's father was. The manager opened the display case. Maya picked up the guitar, sat down, and played. The sound filled every corner of that store. A customer filmed everything on his phone. In 6 hours, 3 million views. What happened next changed the lives of everyone in that room, including the man who tried to humiliate her. The full story is in the link below the title. You won't want to pause halfway through.